You're a high achiever. You don't quit easily, but lately you're starting to question whether staying is helping you grow or slowly holding you back. If you've ever felt stuck, unchallenged, misaligned with your current role or leadership, perhaps deep down something just feels off. This episode is the gut check you didn't know you needed. Because here's what I hear all the time from women in tech. I should be grateful. I have a good job. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the problem. This isn't ideal, but I've worked so hard to get here. Maybe tech as a whole isn't for me anymore. I don't want to quit. I just want to feel better again. And perhaps the hardest one to hear. I know something's wrong, but I can't tell if it's fixable or if I'm just afraid of starting over. If any of those thoughts sound familiar, know this. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You just need a clarity audit. Because feeling stuck isn't always burnout. It isn't about needing a break. Sometimes it's just leadership maturity kicking in. It's your internal compass telling you you've outgrown this, or this culture is no longer aligned with who you've become. So in today's episode of Leading Women in Tech, I'm going to walk you through why high performers struggle to recognize when it's time to move on, the 5 subtle signs you're out of alignment with your current role, and the prompts that you need to hear that I use every day with my executive clients to decide, should I fix this or is it time to go? So stick around as we get through today's episode. In particular, stick around for those 5 questions that will help you get unstuck this week without blowing up your life or your career or second guessing yourself into paralysis. Let's talk about what happens when we don't listen to that quiet gut feeling, when we stay because we think it's loyal or not that bad, or simply because we're too exhausted to figure out what's next. Here's the truth bomb. Staying too long has a cost. Maybe you already knew that, but that cost often shows up before we're consciously ready to admit something is wrong. If you're the woman who's overextended herself, the woman who is the go-to, the glue, the reliable one, you're usually the last to admit you're burned out. You've normalized exhaustion. You've internalized the idea that loyalty is leadership. You may be telling yourself that without you, the team will fall apart and it's not fair to leave your team behind. But here's what I want you to consider. Are you staying out of strategy or out of habit? If you're the only woman in the room or just feel lonely, even if there are other women around, irrespective of who they are, if you've broken barriers and earned that seat at the table, it's easy to feel like leaving a misaligned org is quitting or giving up. But staying to prove yourself in a space that doesn't value your leadership isn't grit, it's depletion. Leadership burnout doesn't always look like collapsing. It can show up in surprising ways, like being numb to your wins or feeling stuck but overworking anyway. Perhaps you're losing sight of your why. And all too often, nodding along in meetings but thinking, oh, what's the point? Then there's the slow fade of career stagnation where you're no longer getting invited to the big strategic conversations, or perhaps your responsibilities aren't growing, but your influence is also not growing. There's the frustration that promotions are going to people with less experience and you're working harder but being seen less. Here's the hardest part. When you stay too long, your leadership brand starts to erode. You go from being seen as a visionary to being seen as safe. And safe doesn't get you promoted. So ask yourself, what are you trying to prove by staying? Are you aligned with the values of the company you operate in? Or are you just enduring them? And what would next level of you choose? Would they choose this role again? This isn't about jumping ship at the first frustration. I really want to get to that today. Today, I want you to make an informed decision. I've just started with some of the reasons why people stay when maybe they shouldn't. But today, I want to give you the mindset tools to evaluate your reality, not justify your loyalty. Because long-term leadership growth isn't about what you can do. It's about where your energy, your values and vision are being amplified. And if they're not being amplified, it's time for a real conversation with yourself about what staying is actually costing you. Here's the thing about stagnation. It rarely shows up in a performance review. You're still doing your job. You're still getting results. On paper, you probably look like a success story, but internally you feel off. Let's break down some of the subtle signs that you might have outgrown your role or your company, especially if you're a high performer. Number 1, boredom, irritation, or even indifference where there used to be curiosity or energy. Tasks that used to challenge you now feel boring, routine. You're coasting, but not in a good way. Number 2, promotions that no longer feel worth the cost. That next rung up, it feels like more meetings, more politics, more burnout, but not more meaning. Number 3, growth stagnation. You've mastered the job, you've solved the team's problems, but there's no challenge on the horizon. You're no longer being stretched. You're being contained. And number 4, values misalignment with your leadership. It could be subtle, like decisions that make you wince, or bigger, like staying silent in rooms where the culture no longer reflects what you stand for. Stagnation is not a reflection of your worth. It's not about being ungrateful or impatient. It's about your wisdom, your inner wisdom, telling you it's time to evolve. Let me tell you about a client. Let's call her Sandra, VP of Engineering at a mid-sized SaaS company. When we started working together, she'd already spent 7 years at the same company, growing from manager to director to VP. It looked like a great trajectory. She loves her team. She had equity, she had a seat at the table. But for the year before she came to work with me, she'd been waking up dreading Monday mornings. Monday mornings, Sunday scaries, we've all been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? And still she kept telling herself, this is what I wanted. I should be happy. She actually came to me to explore whether she should quit tech, right? That's the conversation she thought she wanted to have with me. Here's what's really happening. Her values had shifted, but her orgs hadn't. In fact, I'd argue her orgs potentially had shifted, and then the two of them had diverged, her and her organization, in terms of value set. Her peers had stopped challenging her thinking. She'd actually outgrown them. And her leadership, they no longer inspired her. But she was loyal. She didn't want to abandon her team, so she stayed. And those 12 extra months before she came to work with me, she lost confidence. She stopped speaking up. She got passed over for the CTO role that they created because she was seen as stable but not CTO material. The good news, once we named that misalignment in coaching sessions, she started exploring. 6 months later, she landed a role at a mission-driven company, re-energized by her career, and most importantly, started trusting her instincts again. I'm delighted to say she's just coming up to week 9. And she is a different woman. It's incredible to watch. And I'm just honored to have supported her through that. But she came to me thinking that she was exiting and to have that kind of conversation. But it turned out that wasn't what she needed, because she is now thriving and loving what she's doing it and knowing she's making an impact. She's gone from thinking she needs to quit and go and work in education to realizing no, tech is where her passion is. So remember, you don't need to be in a toxic environment to know it's time to move on. It doesn't mean that there isn't a reason to move. Sometimes you've simply outgrown the space you once fit in. That's not failure, that's growth. Here's something I see all the time in my executive coaching. Women who've built their identity on being the high achiever, the go-to, the one who always figures it out. So when the role no longer feels right, they don't leave, they double down. They try harder in a system that no longer fits them. It sounds like, I should be able to make this work. Maybe I'm just tired. It's not that bad. I'm lucky to have this job. I don't want to look flaky or ungrateful. But here's the truth. High achievement doesn't mean staying stuck in a job you've outgrown. Loyalty is only noble when it's mutual. You're not a quitter for wanting more. You're not disloyal for recognizing that your growth has outpaced your role. But when your identity gets wrapped up in being the fixer, that linchpin, the one who can handle anything, it becomes harder to hear your own inner voice saying, this is no longer it. So if you're stuck, tired, misaligned, pause and ask yourself, am I staying because this is still serving me, or because I don't know who I'll be without it? Letting go of a role, a company, or a leadership status can feel like letting go of who you are. Leaving is not quitting, it's evolving and choosing something better for your future. So let's cut through the confusion. If you're still unsure whether you're stuck in a slump or genuinely misaligned. Here's a leadership checklist I walk clients through. These are not things that show up in your performance review, but they're some of the most common signs it's time to move on from a role, especially for high achieving women in tech. Ask yourself, of these next 5 things, are more than one of these true right now? Number 1, do you have values misalignment? If you no longer feel proud of how decisions are made, of how people are treated, there could be a values misalignment between you and your org. If you find yourself biting your tongue when you used to speak up, or perhaps the leadership you once respected now feels disconnected or even toxic, then this is a sign to move on. Sign number 2, are you in a toxic workplace or something that is diminishing your leadership? If you feel drained after interactions with key leaders, you're not getting coaching or stretch opportunities, just ask some vague feedback. Maybe your voice feels minimized or worse, ignored. Then this is somewhere that isn't serving you. It's time to move on. Number 3, do you have a lack of visibility or growth opportunities? If despite delivering results, you've overlooked your high impact projects or promotions, or you're doing more but gaining less, if your ideas aren't landing, even though you've done the work I've talked about in previous episodes around making sure your voice is heard, then you're being used but not being seen, and it's time to move on. Perhaps you have chronic burnout. This is number 4. If this isn't just a busy season, but it's always a busy season, and you feel like you're running on fumes, and it's been that way for months, if your work feels like a grind, not a mission, if you're irritable, exhausted, or emotionally numb more often than not, then this is a sign that you need to change. And then sign number 5, if you're no longer learning or feeling challenged, if you've mastered the role, if you've not grown new skills, if you dread meetings, you're coasting through your workday and you're feeling understimulated, there's no upward path that excites you, then this is absolutely a reason to move on. Those 5 things are not just frustrations. They are signs of career misalignment. And for many women leaders, especially those who've been told to be grateful or wait your turn, these signs get dismissed until burnout sets in. Misalignment, unfulfillment, not being heard, not growing, all cause burnout. If you stay too long, you'll be thinking like Sandra, tech isn't for me. Perhaps the answer is simpler, and that it's your current company and leadership that isn't for you. You deserve better. You deserve better than just coping. If you've ticked 2 or more of those boxes, it's time to ask, is this job still aligned with the leader I want to become? But what if you can't leave yet? Maybe your gut says it's time to go, but your life, your finances, your circumstances say not yet. If that's you, take a breath. You're not alone. If you feel trapped in golden handcuffs, which we're going to talk about more in a minute, family obligations, visa requirements, or a deep sense of loyalty, let's unpack the difference between real blockers and fear disguised as logic. Some of the reasons I hear all the time for not leaving include, I've invested too much time here. If I just stay another year, I'll get that promotion. This one is often coupled with a promotion plan where the goalposts keep moving, but the reality is those goalposts will keep moving. Number 2, I won't find this salary anywhere else. Like, God, I hear this all the time. This one is quite honestly the one I get the most. You've got a mortgage, you've got a family, perhaps you've got kids about to go to college. Money matters. I hear it. That's okay. But do your homework. And remember that a starting point on a job listing is just that, a starting point. I had a client recently double the basic comp when she was offered the job. The recruiter thought there was no wiggle room. And she was like, I am not moving for this. She had a good job. It's just not the job she wanted. But the CEO wanted my client so much. So that my client eventually gave up talking to the recruiter. And she basically, on Monday morning, after a weekend deliberation, she said she felt sick when she did this. But she emailed the CEO saying, hey, I'm sorry we can't make this work. I'd love to continue this conversation, but it doesn't work. The CEO was just furious because it turned out the recruiter hadn't even taken the comp request to the CEO. Long story short, she doubled her base and more than doubled her bonus from what the recruiter was offering. So just what's written in the JD, I'm sorry, but it doesn't cut it. Be curious about what's out there instead of assuming. The next one I hear all the time is, it'll look bad to leave right now. This one really hurts when we feel like this. It might be that you've just taken on a big project, or you've only been in the role a few months. There are many reasons why we say it will look bad. Make sure you identify precisely why you think this. It's probably just me. I should be grateful is another one. The one always hits a nerve here. It's a raw nerve because people think if it's just me, like I need to just up my game. I'm being pathetic or I'm being childish. Here's the deal. This is gaslighting. When I hear it's just me, I should be grateful. Somebody's gaslighting you all the way. And then there's the final one, the classic. If I just work harder, I'll get noticed. I've talked about this so much in the podcast. Seriously, we need to stop believing this. You need to either change how you talk about what you do and make sure you're visible, or accept that you aren't going to get noticed and get out. Let's be clear. All of those are often myths, not facts. They sound strategic, but they're usually fear, self-doubt, and sadly, outdated career advice in disguise. I've had that. Oh, just keep working hard or don't ask for more. I actually had a client who was told by lots of family not to ask for more recently. And I was like, really? No, you always get to ask for more. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. There's often something else going on. But the reality isn't that simple. And if you dive deeper, there is likely another path forward if you're willing to look for it. But let's talk about those golden handcuffs. This comes up a lot with executive clients, as it should. You've got the equity, the RSUs, a retention bonus, a compensation package that looks great on paper. But here's the truth. The cost is your energy, your health, your visibility or growth. You're not winning if you're unhappy. One of my clients came to me very recently saying, I can't leave. I've got a 400k retention bonus in 12 months. I know it's not that much, not life-changing, but it's not to be sniffed at. No one's ever going to match a 400k retention bonus. Fast forward a few months. She landed a role in a Series B startup that not only matched her compensation over 12 months, but offered more autonomy, strategic input, energy alignment, and she'd felt more towards this role than she had in years. And she got the title bump that I said she really needed for her resume. The myth that no one will pay me this much again is just that, a myth. In today's market, companies will move mountains for the right candidate who can solve their problems. And as I said, that CEO story, the CEO didn't even know that the recruiter was a blocker here, because the recruiter, I believe the best in the recruiter here. I think they genuinely didn't think there was any movement. I hear this all the time. The key, position yourself as that candidate, the one who they want above anyone else, and then you can negotiate and negotiate and negotiate. Don't sit out the gate. Don't rule yourself out in those initial recruiter conversations. Wait until the hiring manager has decided you are the one that's going to change their lives. But what if you're really stuck, at least for now? Perhaps there's a visa situation here, that kids in school situation, which means you can't move without doing something drastic, and remote jobs are, definitely on the decrease, sadly. That's a whole other conversation. Not every transition is immediate, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you should stay passive. Here's what I coach my clients to do when leaving isn't an option today, but staying isn't exactly what they're after either. First of all, renegotiate scope if you can. What can you take off your plate? Can you shift towards more strategic projects, delegate differently, reset performance expectations, have a conversation about renegotiating the scope of your role so it's more aligned. Number 2, set internal boundaries. Stop defaulting to yes. Literally just recording a LinkedIn live on this. You can see my timelines here for how things go out. If you've heard that one about boundaries, burnout and boundaries, stop defaulting to yes. Create clear start-stop times. Say no without guilt. Block time for your career planning. Let's just get that done. And then the third one, build visibility and prepare to take the leap. Use this time to update your LinkedIn, clarify your next role target, expand your network, position yourself. Don't wait until you're burned out to start looking. Just because it feels like you can't leave right now doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking. It's surprising what's out there if you take the time and network. So get your resume and LinkedIn profile in order. Start building your network of executive recruiters. If you know you can't leave this month, ask yourself, what's one thing you can do to shift things this week to make it so that your current role is more aligned? Even if that's not exactly meaning you're ready to leave yet. Even a 5% shift in how you show up can start changing everything for you, your energy, your confidence, and open up options for you. Okay, let me just take a little segue here. If this episode is resonating, can I ask you a quick favor? If you are finding value in the Leading Women in Tech podcast, do me a huge favor and take a moment to subscribe in your favorite player, leave a rating or review, and share this with a colleague who maybe needs to hear it. It helps so much for getting this podcast into the ears of more brilliant women in tech who are ready to thrive in their terms. And let's change the world. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe button, and drop a comment for the algorithm. That really, really helps. All right, back to the episode. What if this is just a rough patch? Before you rewrite your entire career path, let's take a pause. Not every season of dissatisfaction means it's time to leave. And I think this moment of pause is why we all stay stuck. We don't make deliberate choices in our careers, even if we do make deliberate strategic choices in our actual jobs. Sometimes what we're experiencing is burnout, a rough quarter, a leadership challenge that's solvable with reflection, not resignation. So rather than assuming one way or another, let's dig into this too. So you aren't sat in the I absolutely have to go camp or I should never leave because it might be a rough patch that will pass. Let's get clarity. Here's the key. You need to learn to tell the difference. Burnout can mimic misalignment. You're depleted, you're overfunctioning, you're carrying too much invisible labor. Everything can feel wrong, even the parts you used to love. And bad cycles can cloud your clarity. Maybe it's a restructuring, a difficult team member, or a new boss that's thrown off your rhythm. Just this last week, I was working with a client whose organization is going through a huge reorg. She's been incredibly disillusioned by it all. But when we scratched beneath the surface of her frustration, there was a lot to be positive about and be excited for as they move beyond the reorg. So it isn't always about leaving, but it is always about something needing attention. True misalignment runs deeper. When things mean you need to leave, it feels like a consistent low-grade ache. Low-grade ache in your soul, if you like. You're not just tired. You're disconnected from the purpose, the leadership, the direction of the work. So how do you tell the difference? Well, here are 3 coaching questions I ask clients to help them reflect. If I had 1 month off to fully reset, would I come back? If the answer is no, that's important to pay attention to. Question number 2. What's the real reason I'm staying, and is it aligned with who I want to become? Fear, familiarity, or loyalty aren't bad reasons, but they might not be good ones either. Question number 3. If nothing changed in the next 6 months, how would I feel? Sometimes we delay decisions because we hope things will magically improve, but be honest with yourself. And for my burned out high achievers that are listening, you don't need to blow up your career to feel better. But if your job is the reason you can't recover, that's also not sustainable. This isn't about being impulsive. It's about practicing sustainable leadership strategies and giving yourself the emotional permission to evolve when it's time. Okay, I promised you at the beginning 5 reflection prompts to give you clarity. So let's wrap up this episode with a mini coaching session in your earbuds. Get your pen and paper out. Let's write these ones down. Or bookmark it in your favorite podcast player if you've got that and come back to it when you're not driving. Okay, you don't need a dramatic wake-up call to decide it's time for a change. Sometimes all it takes is pausing long enough to ask better questions and listening to the answers that bubble up when you stop performing and start reflecting. So grab a journal, a voice note app, or just a quiet walk. These 5 prompts are here to help you move from stuck to evaluative, if I can't see that word, to empowered. Okay, prompt number 1. Am I staying because I'm growing or because I'm afraid? Are you expanding your leadership visibility and voice, or just clinging to certainty because you don't know what's next? Here's an executive mindset tip for you. Fear often masquerades as loyalty. Be honest. Is this still your growth path? Reflection prompt number 2. If I left, what would I hope to gain in the new role? What's missing right now? More impact, better culture, less emotional labor? A leader who advocates for you, getting clear on what you want, helps you stop tolerating what isn't working. Okay, prompt number 3. What part of me feels most out of alignment here? Is it your values, the leadership culture, the pace of priorities of the business? If you feel like you're constantly self-editing or dimming your light, that's the definition of misalignment. This might help you when you go back to the previous question in terms of what do you hope to gain in the new role? Sometimes the things that are most out of alignment are what you're craving, but sometimes not. Sometimes they're just misaligned. So take a moment to go back and forth between those last 2 prompts. Prompt number 4. Where do I feel invisible or underleveraged? Or are my ideas landing? Am I in the right rooms? Are my superpowers being used, or am I just fixing and the fixer who keeps everything running? Clarity on your career often comes when we notice where our value goes unseen. And hey, as an executive coach, I want you to be seen, to be heard, to be noticed and valued. So let's make sure that is happening. And that starts with identifying where you aren't seen, heard, and noticed and valued, and do something about it. Now, finally, the fifth prompt. What do I want to become next? Who do I want to become next? Does this role support that? This is a biggie. Take everything you've already written down from the previous questions and look at this one in detail. This isn't just what's the next title, but what kind of leader, innovator, or human do I want to be? If your current environment isn't helping you become that version of yourself, it might be time to realign. If you want to go deeper in this work, here are a few more things I keep up my sleeve when coaching. Am I aligned with the mission and values of this company? Do I see a path for growth here? Is this environment supporting my leadership, not just my performance? My goal for you with these prompts is to truly understand and make a conscious decision for yourself, not just for your company, your organization, or even your loved ones, but for you. This isn't about jumping ship at the first sign of discomfort, and it isn't about saying, I'm going to stay here longer. It's about becoming a purpose-driven leader who chooses with clarity rather than staying from fear or habit, or ditching because it's frustrating. So give yourself permission this week to slow down, ask these questions, and really listen to what comes up. So before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about leaving strategically, not just quitting, but pivoting like a leader. Because great leaders don't just quit. They don't just react. They quit on their own terms. They do things. They leave well. They have a plan. They have a strategic exit plan, a timeline that buys leverage. We don't wait until we're burnt out and bitter. We say, do I want to be here 3 months, 6 months? It's about rushing. It's about putting you back in control. So if you're feeling that you need to make a plan, make a plan. It's not as hard as it sounds. The next thing is to strengthen your network before you need it. Visibility leads to opportunities. And then finally, regain the subtle visibility shifts. This is a season to advocate for your wins internally, build cross-functional relationship, and maybe even share some thought leadership internally and externally. It's about broadcasting how great you are, not I'm leaving. Start collecting data. Make sure you've got the data where you can back it up to say, this is the impact I've had in my organization, because it's much easier to get while you're there than once you've left, especially if you burnt some bridges on the way out, which we want to avoid. And finally, now is the best time to get coaching support if that's something you're considering. A lot of women come to me burnt out after they've been job hunting for months with no traction, or things are desperate at work. If you can make a deliberate decision that you're going to do something and get coaching support, we can move forward with clarity and confidence and land you something far faster that's really exciting. Leadership exiting is not a failure, it's a strategy. And even if you aren't sure you're ready to exit, it's a good time to prepare. It's not quitting early, it's proactive. So I want you to remember as we exit today's episode, you don't need to decide today, but you do need to lead yourself like the executive you are becoming. Because stuck is not a leadership strategy, but clarity, that always is. If you're ready to find clarity, to figure out whether you're misaligned, overdue for a pivot, or simply under-leveraged in your current role, I've got something for you. It's called What's Holding You Back, a diagnostic for women in tech, a quick quiz you can take to help you identify the real friction points between your career dissatisfaction and what's really going on. Whether it's burnout, invisibility, values misaligned, or just a role you've outgrown, it will help you map what's really going on and give you the next step to take. Go to tonycollis.com/what's-holding-you-back. I'll put that link in the show notes, because your career deserves more than guessing games. You deserve to be in a role where your values are aligned, your voice is heard, and your impact is fully recognized. So take the time to reflect, to evaluate, to lead yourself with intention. And if you need help with that journey, you know where to find me. Until next time, my friend, don't wait to be invited. Lead on purpose.